Hi, I'm Joel from Springfield, Missouri, and I play at Rivercut Golf Course. Welcome to Golf Smarter.
Hi, this is Mike Leggett from New Concord, Ohio, and I play at JC Public Golf Course.
This is the Golf Smarter podcast, number 1012, or episode 1012.
The one everybody knows is the game of golf is like the game of life. You get bad breaks from good shots. You get good breaks from bad shots, but you have to play the ball as it lies. But there's another one that he talks about in the game of golf, I suppose also in the game of life. One must do one's own reasoned and resolute best, whether the prospect be bleak or rosy. As long as you do your best, as long as you have prepared, as long as you have put your time in, as long as your expectations are in right alignment, then whether the outcome is not what you wanted or beyond what you wanted, you have to be disciplined on how you're taking that approach. And that word reason to me, Fred, was the part that everything that we've done in youth golf since I've started this are coming across. And that is coaches, parents, friends, results, giving them unrealistic expectation. I cannot go out to the golf course tomorrow with an absolute expectation of shooting 72 if I've never broken 80.
Using golf to teach the game of life with Bobby Jones' great-grandson, Robert Jones Black.
This is Golf Smarter, sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome to the Golf Smarter podcast, Robert.
Welcome. All right, do it over.
I got to work these
hello,
people.
Friends.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. Take two.
Yeah, there you go.
Welcome to the Golf Smarter podcast, Robert.
How you doing, Fred?
I'm doing great. It's so great to talk to you. A brief history of how we met and then why your name is Robert and not Bob or Bobby. So I've told this story. The audience is aware that I went to the Masters here this year, 2025, for my first time. And we had these members' badges because we were the guest of Charlie Yates Jr. And at one point, I'm there with Mac Barnhart, agent for Lucas Glover. We're chatting. Boy, am I dropping names fast. So we're chatting away, whatnot, and Max says, "Hey, can you get a table?" He says to one of the people who works there. And they said, "Okay, we got you this table." We sit down at the table, and there's already 3 people at the table, soon to be 4. And we get into a conversation. "Hey, how you doing? What's going on?" And so the older gentleman, probably in his late 70s, maybe his 80s, and you can confirm this in a minute, he says, "Yeah, I've been coming to the Masters since I was 14. Or was it 16? 14. I'm like, "Wow, how is that?" He goes, "Yeah, I've been coming every year." "How?" He goes, "Family." And I just look at him and give him the hands like, "Come on, there's more to this than that." Tell him, he goes, "Oh, Bobby Jones was my grandfather." "Wait a minute. You're first cousins with Dr. Bob?" "Yes, I am." And so then sitting next to him is one of his sons and his son's wife. And then joining us a few minutes later is another one of his sons, Robert Jones Black. Welcome to the Golf Smarter podcast, Robert.
Good recap. And I guess you got to see where my height came from too, didn't you?
Yeah, not your dad. It came from your brother.
My mom is 5'3" and my dad is 5'8". I went to 6'5". My older brother, he capped out at 6'2". But somehow, somewhere, the height came in. And I remember we were taking the picture. I was like, "Don't you see where this came from?" So
yeah, I shared with a couple people the picture that I took with the 3 of you. And they're like, somebody wrote back, "Who are those giant people? I don't recognize those giant people."
we're trying to start a basketball team in the 70s, I think. One of the things I love about the Masters, I'm on 25 years. My first one was Olafable.
Okay.
And one of the things I like about that particular area is that you kind of have this kind of community sitting. And so you never know who you're going to sit down with. And most everybody always is very open to just having conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You picked up on probably a kind of a life trait that my dad has himself and instilled in us, especially in our early stages of young adulthood and everything. And that was we're humble about, who we're related to. And just a nice subtle message throughout life of Bobby created or accomplished some really great things, but we did not. So appreciate it, respect it, but be humble about it. And that's it's a tough area to navigate through, especially as, now I'm approaching 50. I'm going to turn 50 this year. And then you talked about Bob Jones 4. You have to talk about it, and you have to represent the story and the legacy
And the brand.
And the brand.
That's what I've talked to Dr. Bob about a lot. It's like representing the brand.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's interesting when historically, when you talk about generation transfer, that second generation to third generation of any company that's a family owned and operated company, that second to third generation is where it starts getting really tricky because one, especially in Bobby's case, that audience that got to see the living and breathing Bobby Jones is moving on. The second generation was able to carry that legacy and the story and get us involved with some really great things. Now my generation and then my son's generation, you're getting away from that tangible attachment. So it's this really tricky way of saying, how do you stay relevant and not just become public domain, but not also trying to capitalize on what Bobby Jones accomplished. And I think the family has always done a great job of that. And I think it's interesting that is part of me and the cousins that are all in my age group, which I think there's 12 of us. That's the task that we have for the next, 30, 40 years is how do you tell this story? Now, we are very fortunate in the fact that every April, he is talked about a lot. And then now every August, with Eastlake hosting the Tour Championship, we've kind of bookended the golf season with these moments of talking about Bobby Jones. So it helps us a lot.
A century later.
Yeah. Still there. But there's still just that obligation, responsibility to figure out how do you keep that relevance, and it gets more challenging as time passes.
Right. But, and your humility aside, there are photos of him behind you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how did it get to be your Robert Jones Black? How did that last name come into play? How did that move forward?
So my grandmother's, my dad's mother was Bobby Jones' firstborn, and that was one of his two daughters.
Okay.
So she was Clara Jones, and she ended up marrying a local and actually somebody she knew for a large part of her life because they were in the same neighborhood area of Atlanta. And she ended up marrying William Black, who went by Bill or Billy, and he incredibly fascinating personality in himself. He had his own story. He was very involved with golf. He was very involved with the Greater Greensboro Open for the years that's the title that now the Wyndham Championship here in Greensboro, North Carolina. He was a big part of that. Great golfer, lived his life every single day that it wasn't pouring down rain. He was on the golf course, but he had gotten into the car business in 1955. He went to General Motors and asked about franchise opportunities. And they gave him the Cadillac franchise in Greensboro, North Carolina. That's what moved him from Atlanta to Greensboro. So, and then they had three kids. They had my dad and then two sisters, Claire and then Mary. And Mary, unfortunately, we lost in 2020.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, but that's where we get the Black last name attachment to it. And actually, it was Dr. Bob and I in 2014 or 15, somewhere around there, where I started wanting to become involved with the family business on the Jones side, where he was just kind of like, you really should embrace the full name that you've been given and just go with Robert Jones Black. And I've actually, it's been, again, I like to stay humble to everything, but I think it's kind of fun, and
Sure.
it's a name that people remember. So
Yeah,
it's
and
a
so
good branding exercise.
when you're introduced to someone, I'm Robert Jones Black, it doesn't register that it's, direct descendant of Bobby Jones.
Yeah.
And so with the family history as it is, and thank you for that explanation, at what point is the word indoctrinated as to what the history is and what it means to the world at large beyond just the family?
Natural indoctrination to a degree. Never a point, which again, I really like this about the family as a whole. Never a point of like any sort of sit down or anything that happened. I think natural, I say natural because as I was entering adulthood post college, just coincidentally, we had the centennial 100-year birth anniversary of Bobby Jones. And then immediately 2 years later, we had the release of Bobby Jones' Stroke of Genius, which had, Fox Theater Atlanta, where we did the full red carpet show and all of that, and meeting Jim Caviezel. And the writer and creator of that is still associated with one of our foundations, Bobby Jones CSF, Kim Dawson. So I think just in that time frame was when I really started registering, obviously being a sport fan growing up and understanding what he had accomplished, understanding the magnitude, I guess. And it wasn't until that mid-20s for me to really start getting that what he did was special, but more importantly, the legacy that needs to be maintained around character, integrity, honesty. All of this was so much more than a record that was made in golf, in terms of majors won in the Grand Slam. There was something bigger there. And that's ultimately what I attached to. And I guess anybody that would see my golf swing would understand that. If I can't attach to the golf game, then try to attach to what he was off the golf course, maybe a little bit more relatable.
When you were growing up, what kind of stories did your dad share? And did he have memories of his grandfather? And did he share them?
He did some. Again, he was somewhat quiet about it. I think that Bob Jones, my dad, and that generation, when you're the grandchild, I think you're naturally going to get added pressure and expectations from people because it's still just such a connect. I think my dad was 23, 24 when Bobby Jones passed away. So he, certainly went all through childhood. I think they did a lot of like summers visiting in Atlanta, staying at the house and things like that. And, just some of the things that my dad would chat casually through was how much of a fan Bobby was with golf, and golf, in the 60s just starting to become a broadcast sport and all of that, that when it was aired on TV, Bobby was not moving from the TV. But my dad, let's see, was born in 47, and it was right around that time period that Bobby was diagnosed with syringomyelia. So every grandchild, kind of depending on age of when they came in, and my dad was the first grandchild, they know him as not Bobby Jones the golfer, but Bobby Jones the syringomyelia. I don't want to say patient, but my dad watched him go from cane to crutches to wheelchair to completely being immobile. He's got a really good master story I love to tell.
Please.
And I'll that will be the nugget that I can provide. That's
And let me also, since you talked about when your dad was born, let me apologize for saying maybe he's in his 80s. I was right. He's in his late 70s.
late 70s. Yeah. But
Okay.
I think absolutely right. And I think that was a good guess. So I don't think he'll be mad at that.
I appreciate that. Okay.
No
But
problem
your
at all.
favorite story.
This is, and what's funny about this is he told this story. I think it was the first Masters we went to after COVID. So maybe 22. So this is a new story for me.
Wow.
But he had a friend there and we were sitting across the 10th tee and we were facing towards the cottages. So away from 18 green and everything. And that cottage, one of the first ones by 10T is the Jones Cottage. And so he's talking to this friend. I'm like, I've gone to this tournament for 22 years at this point with my dad. And he said, you know, there's a funny story about that cottage. He said, that front room right there, when I came to the Masters, that's where I stayed. And I would stay in the front room. And he said, so one year, and he was trying to recall his age, and I'm going to, thinking it was 14 or so based on the timeliness of this story. He said, I'm sitting and I've woken up and I'm just kind of sitting in my room and Bobby Jones, which they call Bub. I'm sure Bob Jones has talked about that. Is Bub was sitting in the living room. And my dad looks out the window and he sees Jack Nicklaus and Jack's dad walking out of the clubhouse, walking past 10T, approaches the cottage, knock on the door, and in comes Jack Nicklaus and his dad. So my dad's like, you know, I got to hang out in my room, can't go out there. And they visit for, I don't know, a handful of minutes or whatever it was. And, you know, just hears conversation happening or whatever. And then, you know, you hear the pleasantries of an exit, door shut, looks out the window, and Jack and his dad walk back to the clubhouse. And it was Jack Nicklaus telling Bobby Jones that he was going pro. And my dad was sitting in his bedroom, sitting there watching or hearing this take place. So, and I was like, how in the world have we come here for 22 years? This is the first time that you're going to share that story. But I think it just shows that my dad, traditionally, he's just a keeps to himself type individual, very smart business guy. He's had an amazingly successful career. He continued the car dealership piece. We're still doing that now. My sister and brother in that business, and then other ventures that he took on along the way. But he just, I think, likes to keep some things very personal and to himself. So it didn't surprise me he had never shared the story. But I found it, I was like, that was such a monumental moment in golf history. Because Bobby did not want Jack to go pro yet.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, because Bub was an amateur and he was really promoting the idea and loved the idea. And as soon as the whole concept of, and I'm just from what I know talking to Dr. Bob, is that he didn't want to go pro. He retires at 27 and becomes an attorney.
Yeah.
But pro was not that era. But Jack Nicklaus kind of changed things.
It did. He did. And that was, you're right. Because it's early 60s. I think it was 61, 62 where Jack went pro, I think. And yes, the purses and the sponsorships and all of this stuff that we see didn't exist then.
No.
So you could see what Bobby Jones, kind of argument would be there. And I think Jack needed one more U.S. amateur to tie Bobby Jones. Might need to fact check that for me. But it was something along as one more would tie Bobby Jones, and he wanted that. So he did not like seeing Jack go, pro on it. So, but anyway, it was to me a fascinating story, and I think my dad's experiences growing up and everything. Again, when Bobby Jones is for the most part not able to move and not able to go outside and hit golf balls with his grandkids and all that, you would imagine that being the story. But unfortunately, because of syringomyelia, it just wasn't. Very stationary. So it was a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
They all say, Bob and my dad, they all talk about how incredibly smart Bobby Jones was. Yeah. It's no mistake about the accomplishments he made in education. He was a smart guy.
Yeah. He figured it out. And is there conversation, beyond the foundation? I'm not sure how many cousins you have in your generation. Dr. Bob and your dad are the same generation, but your generation may have even more. And is there ever conversation about the maintenance of the legacy and the promotion of the brand?
Well, the short answer is yes. And thankfully, we still have, a fair amount of youth in that second generation, ranging from maybe early 60s as the youngest to my dad being the eldest at 77. So, I think what we look at, and again, it goes back to every conversation of every family business. You talk about generation transfer, but
And
right
generation
now,
trauma.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's like right now, most of the activity that's being done and the work being done, they're still able to manage. And so what I felt like was a really nice gesture, if that's a fair way to put it, was I expressed interest in 2014 to get involved with the commercial side, and did that for a number of years. And it was nice to just kind of see what the decision making process was, how we look at it. But what I really got out of that is the protection that the family provides to the legacy itself. It is incredibly tough to match in like a licensed commercial sense. So, if it were a product that came out of the next great golf gadget or whatever, that they made sure that any partnership we had was really reflective of the standards that the family wanted to maintain around the name. And that was such a neat thing to see, that it wasn't just talk, that there was constantly things being presented that immediately the family goes, just, that's not the fit. That's not the opportunity. That's not where we want to see the name. And then I think probably the hardest thing to fill next generation is especially Bob Jones' ability to tell the stories. He knows it inside out, and he's a very good orator. I mean, he's just so good at speaking.
Oh, yes.
So tough to fill that. It's like, that's, how does that with the next generation? But we're a small family. I mean, it's still, like I said, I think it's 12 that are in the third generation. So it's,
Okay.
it's still a very manageable size, so that if and when we transition to a new generation being part of the company, it won't be inundated with 30, 40, 50 cousins. It's still going to be a very manageable.
I need to apologize. I feel kind of weird. I talk about the brand, and here's Bobby Jones, who is such a strict promoter of amateur golf, and here we are talking about a brand. He probably wouldn't be too happy about the way that's being discussed. My sense from, where he came from and what he stood for.
Well, and I think again, that's not inaccurate. And the first opportunity, I don't know how many people know this, was actually Ely Callaway. And this is
I got stories for you on that one. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, but Ely, he had come across a signature of Bobby Jones that was written as Bobby, which was incredibly rare, because Bobby always signed his name as Robert. But he presented it to the family, and I think at the time it was my grandmother, and said, "Hey, I have an idea to create a golf line, and I want this signature to be the mark." But nobody. This was like 88, 89, I think, when the first meeting took place. Family, nobody really knew what licensing was at that time, so it was not very well accepted. But to your point, the biggest hurdle from the family and from my grandmother especially was, I don't think Bobby Jones, I don't know if he would be supportive of this or whatever. But I think one of the best things that the family did was to be able to recognize that the most important thing we can do is keep his name relevant. And what a better way to do it than to put it onto a golf club.
Right.
And so they did end up doing the deal, but that was actually our early education of name, image, and likeness, as everybody knows it today, because thank you, college sports. But name, image, likeness, and how that is done. I tend to want to think that Bobby was also very innovative. From the work that he did with Spalding to go from the hickory shaft into steel and things of that nature, to me was showing, and even the development of Augusta National, that he wanted to continue the growth of the sport and popularity of the game and make the game easier to play. So I feel like that there's, if he looks at today's world and sees the mass amount of name recognition and licensing that takes place, that he would be accepting of that fact. So, but again, I think as long as we're doing things associated with foundation work, community work, scholarships with Emory, and all of those things that we are involved in, it's a nice balance, and everybody wants to celebrate Bobby Jones. So,
yeah. So what happened? Did Callaway, because there were the Bobby Jones line of clothes and clubs and everything, but did Callaway, was that the old hickory stick stuff? What?
It was a little bit of that he was doing initially. Ultimately, it was Big Bertha.
Oh, okay.
When Big Bertha took off, look at this.
You're not going to believe this. I'm holding up a putter right now that has Callaway on the handle, and we've actually talked about this a couple weeks ago on the podcast. This putter is called the Purist Steel Core Hickory Stick USA, and on it is a signature that I'm not sure if you can read it, but it says Tony Manzoni.
Tony, yeah.
Do you know of Tony Manzoni? So Tony Manzoni, talk about full circle. Tony Manzoni and Richard Parente, who grew up together playing golf, came up with this idea for this golf club, and they needed an investor, and they contacted Ellie Callaway. And we've heard this story recently, mainly because Gene Parente, who's still in the golf industry, it was his dad. And Tony Manzoni was an amazing coach down in the Palm Springs area and was on the Golf Smarter podcast at least a dozen times. And he was such a great coach that his team that he coached at College of the Desert, community college, won 29 regional championships in a row, won national champions and whatnot. So anyway, Tony Manzoni is like the only place you can find anything about him is on golfsmarter.com. But the point is that handmade steel core hickory stick by Richard Parente. Tony and Richard, they called Ellie Callaway and said, we have this golf club we want to start and we need an investor. And he looked at it, Callaway looked at it, no thanks, that's fine. And then weeks go by, they couldn't find any money. And once again, they call him, like, give it one more try. Let's give it one more try, Manzoni does. And Callaway said, I'm so glad you called because I'm interested. So they talk about Callaway starting full circle. And here we're back here with Bobby Jones.
Do you know about the book coming out?
Of what?
About Callaway's story?
No.
All right, so that's Nicholas Callaway, his son. I was introduced to him soon after the PGA show this year, and is actually next week. And I'm sorry I don't have the title in front of me, but
we're recording this in May. In late April of 2025. Okay. So next week, that means the book is probably already out.
The book is out, and if it has not been found, I am really anxious to read this, because what Nicholas did was he actually was able to find memoirs written by his dad. Oh. And he just kind of transcribed what those were saying into this incredible career story. And he had an absolute amazing fascination and relationship with Bobby Jones. Now, it's factually, but I don't know to what degree, that they are distant cousins. So they are related in some way, or shape, or form.
Wow.
But when Bobby Jones won the Grand Slam, Ellie was a child, and his mom kind of looked at him and said, "Hey, that's a distant relative of yours." And he forever followed Bobby Jones. And the book ends. Nicholas shared with me like the closing paragraph, and it's all about Bobby Jones and what Bobby Jones taught Ellie Callaway in terms of how to be a career person and work with, character and all this stuff. It's really fascinating. But one more thing on this that I'll share. They invested in AI technology. So if you get the audio version of the book, it is Ellie Callaway's voice narrating the book. So
Whoa.
isn't that cool though? But I did not know.
Not for voiceover announcers, no.
Yeah. No, that's so,
I'm talking
exactly.
to you, Brett.
What are we getting into? A whole nother conversation. But I was like, that's pretty fascinating to have his dad's voice redone and generated to read this book that ultimately most of the words are Ellie's words.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
That really is remarkable. And yes, to the Golf Smarter community, that book, I will track it down and we will talk to Nicholas. Nicholas wrote the book, right?
Yeah. So he's out. Yeah.
We've got to get him on the show and talk about this.
Oh, he'll love it. And I'll get you guys
Family
connected.
History Week here on Golf Smarter.
Definitely so.
I'm curious to know that, I guess, to put it this way, the ball's in your court, your son and the next generation. How is it that you are going to impart the legacy of your family and what it means to not just your family, but the greater community at large, and how you are supposed to carry yourself?
Yeah.
I'm curious as how you deal with that now.
Well, I think...
and you said your son is Bobby.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So Bobby is my son and 10 years old. And
still a little young, but...
Yeah, he's getting it. And that was his third Masters this year. So he's got a head start on me. I don't know if that's what I keep trying to say to him. Like, I don't know if that's going to be a annual thing, but because of being a junior and everything, and not to jump off track, but I think it's very important and be fun for listeners to know the way the Masters handles young kids that are out there is unbelievable. They, I'll tell this quick story. His first time on the property, we had not been on the property for 2 minutes, and we're walking by the putting green, and it was Scotty Scheffler, Max Homa, and an amateur at the 23 Masters. And so I said to Bobby, it's like, hey, come up and get on this little rope line because they're about to walk from the putting green to the first tee. And so Bobby gets right up on the front line, and one of the stewards, yellow hat guys, looks at Bobby and he goes, hey, you want a closer look at this? And Bobby kind of looks up at me like, am I allowed to do this? I was like, go. Yeah.
Not knowing who the kid is.
Not knowing who he is. No, none whatsoever.
Just a kid.
Random child. At the time, 8-year-old kid sitting there. Took him under the ropes, took him not to the first tee, put him on the first tee. They have that umbrella that sits back there.
Yep.
Put him right by the umbrella and let him sit on that first tee to watch Scotty Scheffler, Max Homa, and the amateur tee off. They will, if they see kids at that tournament, they make sure they get to the front. It's absolutely unbelievable. So I had to share that first. And then now to answer your question, I think that it is tough. And I think the unknown piece of the future is what does the relevance, what does the name have in terms of muscle and strength when we get to like 2040, and 2050, which just wild that those years even are coming out of my mouth right now. Golly. But I think one of the benefits that we have is that history is allowing us to really kind of ride some momentum that hasn't been there for a number of years because we're hitting these centennial moments. So he started his majors wins in 1923. So you have from 1923 or 2023 to 2030, you've got a natural ability to talk about the success that Bobby Jones had on the golf course. And so I think that gives us a very nice runway. And of course, 2030, that's the centennial of the Grand Slam. So no mistake that that Marion will be hosting the U.S. Open in 2030. And Bobby Jones completed the Grand Slam on the 11th hole of Marion. So I think, from my standpoint, I have the nonprofit that I started that has a dual purpose. And part of that purpose is to provide some modernization or value to tomorrow's story of Bobby Jones. That's a tough thing to do.
Sure.
But I feel like that was probably the fairest and safest thing for me to do at this point. Again, the generation that's our leadership right now, the cousins that are all involved with the day-to-day decision making, hopefully they get a nice long run of that. And then I certainly am now, with the amount of time I'm spending in the golf industry, very aware that I am much more upfront representation than I was 3 or 4 years ago, which is flattering and honorable and all that, but it also, gives you a little bit of heartburn that you're just kind of like, I want to make sure that I'm able to maintain the standard that my dad's generation is being able to maintain. So I think on the short term, like the 10-year run, be asked or do what I'm asked to do, continue the build of what I've created that certainly honors what Bobby Jones did. And then I think once we get into that 2030s, 2040s, we'll just kind of see. But we've got, I think, we'll say I'm almost 50 and the youngest, maybe 23 now out of our generation. Okay. So we have a nice expansion of age that can always be representing the story. We just got to make sure that that there is value to it beyond what the Masters delivers and Tour Championship at East Lake delivers. But those two, again, they're forever instilled. As long as those tournaments are taking place and hosted at those areas and those properties, we're going to be able to talk about Bobby Jones every year.
Well, thank you for opening the door, because the reason that you're on the episode today is when you sat down at that table, inside the ropes under the umbrella. I don't know what it was, but I overheard, you were sitting to my left with Mac in between us, and you said something about, I want to be on Golf Smarter. I'm like, wait, you just said, how do you know about Golf Smarter? What's going on here? And we got into the conversation, and you were telling me about your nonprofit that you've started, and that's why you were invited. So thank you so much for the first half hour of conversation being about your grandfather. I'm so fascinated by it, and I just love the family connection, and I really appreciate you sharing as much as you have. But let's talk about your organization, because I did find it fascinating and wanted to help to promote it with you.
Thank you. I was like, should we talk about that or should we talk about Mac? Because he stole the show that day anyway. Like, we all got home, we were like, did you hear all those isms that Mac had? But
Mac was working hard, man. He was amazing. And it was it's like I got to hang out with Mac for a couple hours just watching him do his thing, and it was amazing.
Yeah, that was my first time meeting him. And he has again, I thought the conversation that we were having with Mac around the subject area of the nonprofit, I found it to be a very refreshing and kind of different perspective and point of view. But yeah, so in 2021, I started a nonprofit called the Generation Next Project. It was a very reactive decision. The 2020 for me across the board was incredibly difficult. I was in production, live event, and licensing business beyond Bobby Jones. I was working with a couple other athletes, and so when 2020 did its number in terms of shutdowns and the just absolute annihilation of anything live event or production, my business unfortunately was massively impacted by that. And what made it worse, unfortunately, was I have a wonderful business partner. He's one of my seed investors with my sports marketing group. And April 17th, during the peak shutdown, this was when it was hardly, you could not even really go to the grocery store. His 12-year-old son, 4 days shy of his 13th birthday, took his own life. And it was shocking, jarring, everything about it. And I will say, and I don't say this a lot in interviews, but I think one of the things that was, looking back on it, was really interesting was my business partner's name is Brad Hunstable. It was Brad's response, I think, that really started kind of putting some of the early roots about the nonprofit that we'll talk about in a second. Brad's a West Point grad, Ohio State MBA, built a technology company that was really one of the early impactors of increasing bandwidth so that you and I could do what we're doing right now online. And he actually originally created his technology for military use because Brad was the last West Point graduating class pre 9/11.
Whoa.
So he did not have to go to duty. Every class following Brad out of West Point, these guys were going and having to do tours in Afghanistan and Iraq both. So he started technology that increased bandwidth so that families could have satellite conversation. And that ended up migrating into sports. He ended up getting Fox Sports. He got Masters. I mean, he got some great contracts and sold the company in 2016 to IBM. So he's just a very smart, successful, driven guy. And he suffers this tragedy of unimaginable pain. And 2 weeks or so after he buried his son, he's on the phone with me saying, how do we do this where this doesn't happen to anybody else? And I was like, what do you want? And he was like, I want to get out. I want a voice. I want to get big. I want to GoFundMe. I want a foundation. So I initially challenged it and said, don't you think right now is the time for you to just be with family and mourn? And he was like, not what I want to do. We raised through GoFundMe a pretty substantial amount of money. He created a documentary from it very quickly. He actually had a video that he created on Facebook Live that to this day, and this is no joke, it's been, I think it's over 170 million views.
Wow.
And he ended up getting, he was one of the early voices when we were not fighting, but all the discussion about the vaccine. So that was taking media coverage late 2020 into 2021. What we knew and what the experts in child psychology knew was this pandemic just threw gasoline on an already burning fire with youth mental health. And he was one of the first to be able to break into the news cycle and get some interviews. And what was shocking, and I've never talked about this in this way, Fred, what was shocking to us at the time was we were sitting there. We had a PR guy out of DC that was doing outreach, and he was hitting all the big networks and Washington Post and, everybody. Nobody wanted the story. It was all about the vaccine and it was all about the election. Nobody wanted the story. As soon as that vaccine came out and as soon as it started getting mass distribution in 21, all of a sudden the stories start coming out. These schools being shut down. What's the impact? Look at the suicide rate. Look at therapist's office getting inundated with parents saying, my kids are not who they were 6 months ago. So in all of that, and I hope I didn't go long on that, I'm processing myself. And I think it was like winter, like late 2020. And I was looking through, I was actually kind of paging through Down the Fairway that Bobby Jones wrote in 1927. And I don't do this. I don't pick up my great granddad's books and just read them. It was just an impulse, maybe passing time. And I kind of started seeing some of the things that he was referencing in the book. And then I went back into the numerous quotes that I've acquired over time and that you can find on just by Googling Bobby Jones quotes. And I started seeing like this pattern in this message. And what I saw was that Bobby Jones, with that intelligence that he had, really understood how much golf was teaching us about life and even vice versa. And he did not have a mentally easy time with his fame. And I do think, and I think Bob Jones 4 would agree, part of the contributing decision-making of 1930, retiring, was exhaustion of trying to live up to the sports world's expectation that he never wanted to have anyway. He just loved the game. But I'm looking at the quotes and I have this idea that hits my mind, and I'm like, all right, I need to talk to a sports psychologist about this. And I got introduced to a sports psychologist out of Chicago, who was at the time and maybe still the sports psychologist for the White Sox. And he took my call, and I said, kind of explained to him the whole situation. I said, I'm looking at this idea, and I have just a couple questions to ask you. He said, fire away. I said, all right. Question 1. Are there specific mental and emotional responses that take place on the golf course during a round of golf? Yes. I said, okay. Question 2. Are those exact same mental and emotional responses also found in the course of real life? And he kind of giggled and said, yes. And I said, all right. Question 3. If I were to take a young golfer and show them those specific mental and emotional responses on the golf course and teach them how technique and discipline, how to work through those, could they take that exact same technique and discipline and apply it to the real life situation that's creating the same mental and emotional response? And he just kind of laughed and he said, 100%. He said, that's called experiential learning. So that took me to a 6-month process of creating a 501c3, launching the concept, starting to build a team. I was later that year introduced to Carla Steingraber also out of Chicago. And we have now created a program called Change Your Course. And this is what we're doing. We're literally going to golf clubs, organizations, tournaments, whatever, out to college teams, anything, because the age group is 12 to 22 years old. And we're identifying these situations that these kids or young adults are going through on the golf course. We're using that as the communication tool to say, where do you feel like this in real life? And how are you addressing it in real life? And if I've just showed you how to work through first tee jitters, can you take that same practice and use it when you have your class presentation next week or when you have your job interview?
This is all falling into place for you. It's beautiful. I'm really fascinated. What was the quote that jumped out of your grandfather's book, great-grandfather's book, that made you see the parallel and an opportunity?
It was a series of quotes, and my favorite, and I wish I had it in front of me. it's not now the one everybody knows is the game of golf is like the game of life. You get bad breaks from good shots, you get good breaks from bad shots, but you have to play the ball as it lies. And that is by far, that's the universal one. But there's another one that he talks about, and I'm trying to, in the game of golf, I suppose also in the game of life, I'm trying to think how it goes, but it essentially, it says, one must do one's own reasoned and resolute best, whether the prospect be bleak or rosy. That one shook me or just got me where it's in his intellectual way of saying something with the word selection he used. But doing one's own reasoned and resolute best, whether the prospect be bleak or rosy. As long as you do your best, as long as you have prepared, as long as you have put your time in, as long as your expectations are in right alignment, then whether the prospect, the outcome is not what you wanted or beyond what you wanted, you have to be disciplined on how you're taking that approach. I found that one to be so monumental, and I'm sorry that I didn't put it all together, but that's the core once he introduces it is that message. Reasoned and resolute best. And that word reason to me, Fred, was the part that everything that we've done in youth golf since I've started this is the biggest thing that student athletes are coming across. And that is coaches, parents, friends, results, giving them unrealistic expectation. So that word reasoned and resolute best, I translate that as you, as long as you're being realistic with yourself. So I cannot go out to the golf course tomorrow with an absolute expectation of shooting 72 if I've never broken 80. But you have this of all the things that we're addressing through the program, and parents are a big part of it. What we're having to really unfold and uncover and dissect is this kid has a completely disconnected expectation, and he's not or she's not going to be able to accept the bleak outcome. They're only going to be able to accept the rosy outcome. And I think that one to me was where seeing how we've developed the program and learning. I mean, I went into Psychology 101 when I decided to do this, but this was the one where I was like, this is so treatable, because all this is creating anxiety and depression and letdowns and all of these emotions based off of someone's expectation not being aligned with their ability to do their reasoned and resolute best. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Powerful.
Yeah.
Very powerful. What age kids are you working with?
So we really right now we're focusing on 12 to 22, mainly because a lot of these issues that tend to be compared from the golf course to the real life situation are adolescent and young adult issues. Mm-hmm. It's also where the numbers are staggering. But we also know that the best way that you could get really into this is start the education process at 8 to 10 years old. So I think that'll be like a phase 2 for us. However, our solution right now on that is let's start talking to the parents of the 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old golfer. Don't worry about educating the golfer yet. They're not mentally developed enough to really understand how disruptive their mind can be on their trajectory towards adulthood. But their parents are. Yeah. And it's a lot of times we're not intending to misalign or misdirect our child, but God, we get so in the moment, and we're so even ourselves. We care so much about what other people think, much more so than 20 or 30 years ago. So little Johnny at 8 years old has to start winning these golf tournaments. That's where you start seeing the problem. So if we can get to the parents at that age and then let the kids take on the program when they hit 12 years old, that would be our win.
Amazing. And So the change your course curriculum. What kind of training does your educators have to go through on that? And are you using PGA professionals to do this? Or are you using teachers or psychologists? And what's your recruiting process? I'm sorry for 3 questions in a row, but I think they all wrapped
it's
up.
okay. And that's the beauty about this year is last year in 2023, we ran programs, and predominantly that was me and Carla Steingraber, the psychologist. And then we would have a PGA professional in a couple situations. We tried it without golf presence because I got to one point where I was like, they're getting so consumed with the golf result. I didn't feel like we were getting the life message. So I said, let's remove a golf instructor from the program to see how it does. And it did well. But
good.
To the question last year became, how do we take this from hitting 120 kids a year to getting this into the thousands? Which is the question behind that is, how do you scale? And what we have created is a certification program that someone can train themselves into. A club can just hire us in for a day-long program, let their instructor participate. If the instructor likes how the program works and what they want to do, they can get certified, pay a license to the nonprofit, and they go and run the program. We have, I'm so excited on the talent side, and I'm so glad you asked it. Awesome. So the first moment that I went, this is actually true, this is coming true, was last September, a fundraiser that we did up in Chicago. And we were fortunate to have one of the participants as a member at Medina. And we asked that participant if they could possibly get someone out of the golf group to come and just hear the story and see the message and see the program. And that was Eva Rogers. And Eva is an instructor at Medina. She's a top 50 Golf Digest. I mean, her accolades are just unbelievable. She actually taught Annika's kids how to play golf because she was down at Lake Nona before Medina. Once I saw Eva engage, and then, kind of going through the fall of last year going, I hope we don't lose her. But the opposite happened. She started providing us incredibly valuable input. She's created some of the drills and exercises, which is a tough thing to do, Fred, if you think about it. Coming up with a drill or an exercise to practice chipping, practice putting, high chips, pitches, or whatever, that's one thing. When you're trying to work on the mental game, you have to find a way to simulate that emotion. So my example of that would be first tee jitters, which is nerves. That's heart rate. That's out of breath. That's sweat. I'll give everybody this one for free. Do calisthenics on the driving range. Get your heart rate up. Run up and down. Get everything going. Walk up to that ball and hit the drive. And if you do that, repetition. Do 3 drives every time you're on the driving range in that situation and having your body get comfortable swinging that golf club, you're going to be so much more effective addressing those jitters on the first tee of a tournament.
That's amazing.
So it was things like that Eva brought in. And then we've also got, we've got a golf committee and another really well represented PGA certified professional, Nick Bova, out of Hamilton Farm. And Nick is fantastic.
I'm curious, does your program, as you change your course program, does it compete or complement first tee?
This is it does not compete. Definitely a compliment. But what's really neat that I learned through communication with First Tee and then the First Tee chapter here in Greensboro, North Carolina, First Tee Central Carolinas. The CEO, Ryan Wilson, was actually down at First Tee Corporate before he came up. He introduced me or notified me that they have a part of their program called Bridge to Life. Mm-hmm. So they'll end a lesson and they'll ask the kids, now, with what you've learned today, how would you apply it to life? And he said, and then that's kind of it. You get them to recognize that, they're learning manners and they're learning, take your hat off in the building and things of that nature. He was like, you're picking up right there. He was like, it's just natural. We're not here. And I don't mean to be so blunt with it. Our objective is not to put the golf club in someone's hand. Our objective is, if the golf club is in someone's hand, and I don't care if they're a 25 handicap or a +4, is how can you use this sport you love to better off the golf course? So what we say is, we are delivering a program on the mental game through the game of golf for the game of life. I love that your golf game is going to get better, but what I care about is, how are you performing and how are you changing how you're living your life off the golf course? That's what we want to see the result of.
Incredible. How do people find you online and social media, stories? Where do we find more?
GenerationNextProject.org is the official website. We're most active. We use Instagram the most. I'm aging myself on our TikTok, lack of TikTok presence, but I'm sure we'll add into that as well. But our Instagram handle is generation_next_project. So would love to have some followers there. But the official website is the best place. We have all the information there. You can learn more about the actual content and what a 1-day program looks like, what a 2-day program looks like, etc.
And the website is generationnext.com?
GenerationNextProject.org. Yeah, remember the project. Yeah.
.org.
Yeah.
Okay. Robert, thank you so much for doing that work, first of all. And I wish you all the success that you can, reaching the people that you need to reach and the children that you need to reach and the parents. Hopefully they'll understand it too. But I also really touched and really moved by your family story and how you're carrying the legacy along. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. And let me just say to you also, congratulations on the amazing work you've done. I know you're surpassing 1,000 episodes, which I can't imagine what that means to you. I think that when I was introduced to you and I already knew about the Golf Smarter brand, it's such a natural thing to talk about. Golf is such a challenge, and the parting Bobby Jones quote, the most important distance is the 5.5 inches between your ears. And you have a whole podcast about it. So good job and congrats on